Four. Good late afternoon, everyone. It's 4:32, so we are going to call this SHAC meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for coming in this summertime. I know that we're all busy with our families and just trying to recoup and stay on task with all the summertime schedules, so thank you for taking time out of your week to be with us. Our first agenda item is review and approval of the minutes. Mr. Haymart, when you're ready.
Yes, ma'am.
Pull it right up.
Okay, sorry about that. So the minutes from the April 25th meeting were distributed through email prior to today's meeting. Okay. Are there any corrections to the minutes from the April 25th meeting?
The only thing I noticed was that I didn't have to review it looks good.
Oh, it's under district facilitator.
Oh, got it. Yeah, sorry. I was looking
No,
at
that's okay.
district.
No worries.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other recommended corrections? Okay, if there's no corrections, I'll call for a motion to approve the April 25th minutes. Do I have a motion? Okay. That's second.
Second, sure.
Okay. All right, any discussion? Okay. All in favor? Yes, raise your hand, please. All in favor? Unanimous? Okay, good. All right, the minutes for the April 25th meeting are approved. All right, Vice Spear.
Sure. All right, so our next agenda item is a community feedback item. We have a guest speaker today, Ms. Carrie Welsh. She had contacted the SHAC regarding safety concerns with cell phone towers in close proximity to our elementary schools, and so she's coming to share with us information about where she's coming from so we can better understand the concern. Ms. Welsh?
Hi. So my name's Carrie Welch, and I'm a board member of Informed Green Solutions. What we do is research the effects of toxins in our food and environment on child development. And I'm also a parent of two Conroe ISD students, 11 and 14 years old, two boys. And if you look there in the picture, that is McCullough Junior High. I live in the Panther Creek district, so I live near this cell phone tower. Now, I've lived there about 7 years. We moved from New York, and I did not notice it before. Apparently, there was a tower there before, but it was not a 5G tower. I've been told and informed by my resources that a lot of them were rolled out during the COVID lockdown, so you didn't even notice that they showed up. And as I was going to the 9th grade campus that my son will be going next year for the Woodlands High School, I've never been down there. I was just driving down there a couple weeks ago with my son, and I pulled over and I looked because I was thinking, oh, well, he'll get away from it. He's going to the 9th grade campus next year. Nope, there's the 9th grade campus with another 5G tower right there. So why should you care, and why is that a concern? Well, because children are exposed to the same levels of environmental toxins, and they have proportionally much greater exposure compared to adults. So a child's brain will absorb more radiation from the 5G than an adult's brain. So that's why it's a concern. And some of the whistleblowers that are going around talking about it, one of them was from the United Nations, and they rolled it out in Vienna, Austria. And it's like a silent war, she said, because children are vulnerable to the effects because of their little bodies that are still developing and their brains that are still developing. So some of the friends and acquaintances in Vienna, Austria were experiencing what's called EMR, electromagnetic radiation poisoning. So they would get things like nosebleeds, headaches, eye pains, fatigue, vomiting, and also it can affect sleep because there is such thing as children who are more sensitive to Wi-Fi than others, and that is my youngest son, because when we moved to our new house, the smart meter on the back of the house affected him greatly, affected his sleep. We had to get an EMF protector on the house. So it's a serious concern, and he's not at that school yet. He has one more year over at Wilkerson, but he will be over there. So here are some reasons. There's no scientific evidence to support any claim of 5G safety. The government's human exposure guidelines haven't been updated in more than 20 years. They're only really concerned with the thermal exposure. And so the 5G signals do not travel far, so unless people oppose it, they're going to be installed all over the place. Homes, apartments, parks, schools, churches. There's also one across the street from my church. So that's another issue. And the telecom companies like AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon, they're rushing to install the 4G small cell antennas, and then quickly after that, they put the 5G up. So when people oppose it, they might be denied, but leaders can create ordinances to protect the public and the environment, and this is from the EMF Safety Network. You should look it up. It's a really good organization. And another great organization I like is the Children's Health Defense. They said that school districts around the country are risking our children's health and safety by partnering with telecom giants like Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T to put the towers directly on school grounds in exchange for monetary gains. And what I say that it should never be at the expense of our children's health. Never. Because scientific literature says that the harms of RF radiation on children's health, and there's no long-term studies that exist to show that 5G is safe. Because somebody said to me, well, I don't hear of any issues going on. Well, first of all, my Sunday comment that there's been a few at his school that got brain cancer this year. I don't know. I could speculate that there is a correlation, but we'd have to investigate more. So in the field of human health, it is recommended they are about 1,640 feet away from the cell towers and the school grounds. Now, if you look in that picture that we just saw, obviously they are not that far away. They're literally on the school grounds, which is a big concern. So in Europe and the US, people living and working near these antennas, they started experiencing health problems, insomnia, that was the sleep issues that my youngest son had, miscarriages, memory problems, and other neurological issues. Headaches is a big thing, nerve pain. I know I'm sensitive to it, so I can get those same exact side effects. So if anyone has heard of the Environmental Working Group, they do a lot of good work. They had a peer-reviewed study, and they came out saying that we basically recommend stringent health-based exposure standards for both children and adults for radio frequency radiation emitted from wireless devices. And this guideline is the first of its kind, and it fills the gap that agencies like the FCC are supposed to do. The three-letter agencies that are supposed to protect public health in the government often do not do their job. So where does Texas stand on this? Many states have passed laws about putting 5G towers close to schools. I researched a lot about this, and it does not look like Texas is on that list or even has anything up in legislature to make sure that no more cell phone towers get close to schools. And when I spoke to Chris McCord, he said that the McCullough Tower is currently leased to a provider through the year 2036. Do we want to wait and see what happens to our children all the way to 2036? Not really. That's something I do not want to wait for. So what you can do is you can take action. You can educate the public about the dangers of 5G phone towers near schools, find out what contracts the school districts have with the telecom giants, and petition to have the contracts broken immediately. And that is what I could not really find out, like who is the telecom giant and who signed off on this contract, because no one asked me. I mean, I live in the Panther Creek neighborhood, so I was never informed this was going up. So you can contact your legislators today and demand they introduce and support federal and state legislation to ban cell towers from being on or near school grounds in order to protect our children from the harms caused by RF radiation. And you can go to that website, the Children's Health Defense, to sign off on that, and you can go look at the resources on the last page for more information if you're unsure what the effects are, because believe me, they do exist. And some people do not even understand make the correlation between their issues and the 5G towers, but there is an effect. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. Does anyone have questions for Ms. Welch?
Yes.
You know when the contract first was in place?
Well, what he told me, first he told me, oh, well, it's really, I haven't heard of anything. I worked at that school and it's been there since, 2021. I'm like, well, that's impossible because 5G just rolled out a few years ago. And then he's like, oh, yeah, you're right. That just happened recently. I didn't get a definite answer on any of these things, so that's why I feel like there needs to be investigation and to figure out how it got there and why no one was informed, no one was asked about it, and what are they gaining from it?
Right.
Yes, probably.
Does anyone from the district want to comment or say anything?
Comment is appropriate in this video.
Yeah, sure. We'd like to have as much information as we can.
That tower's been there for 2 decades. I was principal there for 2 decades.
Okay,
We're in the contract for 2036.
okay.
The cell tower by the Women's Hospital out through campus, that is not on that one.
Okay. Okay. Do you know anything about how the contracts are made in proximity to the schools, or do you have a point of reference? Not to put you on the spot with a specific question, do you have a point of reference that, that we could contact that would, be able to provide, more information about the towers being close to the schools?
They were instituted, this one in McCullough, over 2 decades ago.
Okay.
It was not originally a 5G tower, it was put up because 5G did not exist.
Yes, right.
It
Okay.
became a 5G tower when 5G started to exist. So we're in contract through the year 2036 with that tower, and that tower is a Verizon tower.
Verizon tower.
So we're in the lease contract through the year 2036.
So Verizon's leasing CISD property
Correct.
to have that tower. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank
Do
you
you
so
know
much.
if there's other campuses, there were 2 that were named, are there other campuses that you're aware of that have towers like us?
Yes, there is one at Armstrong, which is through the year 2033, and there's one that's T-Mobile through the year 2040, which is all Sawmill.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Going on to our next agenda item, we have updates from subcommittees. Our first update is the compliance subcommittee under opioids. So this is a Texas Education Code legislated requirement of the SHAC to understand what is happening in the schools for opioid education, prevention, talking with parents. And so Ms. Taylor is going to provide us with the updates of what the district is currently doing on the topic of opioids. So without further ado.
Hello. We're going to be looking at just the substance use education, prevention, intervention, and consequences as it applies, with our kids, our students, and our families, and throughout our district. And I just kind of want to start out with, this is not an exhaustive list of things that we do to support our students, families, and our campuses, but these are just some highlights that I would like to bring to your attention. The first thing is just the access and presentation of developmentally appropriate campus-based approaches. We do recognize Red Ribbon Week on our campuses, and a lot of times our campuses will focus on making those healthy choices, making sure that, we designate the difference between medication that's prescribed by a doctor versus something that's given to you from a friend. And that kind of aligns too with our Conroe Cares, which covers our positive character traits education from our Texas Education Code 29906. And I want to put that in there because when we look at preventative aspects of substance use prevention, it really, when we look at the use of substances, students or kids or teens or youth are usually using a high percentage of them because of stress, because their peers are using it. And so part of our Conroe Cares really highlights the peer pressure. It highlights how to recognize emotions and feelings, and then how do we manage those in a healthy and helpful way. We also have our health curriculum, which covers similar topics as well as the substance use. Speakers and presentation opportunities that have been offered, which I'll go a little bit more into detail with that. But we've had opportunities with our students on campus. We had Tony Hoffman come. He came and visited our high schools in the fall, or February, February, and then we had him visit in our junior highs in May. And then we also are in the progress of a deterrent program for students who are caught vaping, looking at the education piece of it and the consequences of vaping. And then, of course, other resources that are made available throughout the year, such as vape presentations that campus can utilize. For our parent awareness and education, we do have, once again, the speakers and presentations. I wanted to put these two together with our students and our parents because a lot of this had a student component with it, but we also coupled that with an opportunity for our families to come and attend and also receive the same information. So with Oak Ridge High School in Grand Oaks, we had the opportunity for the district attorney and a parent speaker come to present on regarding opioids and laws. They also had the MCOPE, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. That's Montgomery County Opioid Prevention Endeavor. They had that come and present it as well. And then with our Hidden in Plain Sight presentation, we had 2 opportunities in September, one in the northern part of our county and one in the southern part, where families can come see a mock teenage bedroom with hidden drug paraphernalia. So it's kind of like a hide and seek type thing where you try to look for it. But then we also went into information on the devices found in the room on top of the substances that are of concern. And we covered a pretty vast majority: opioids, THC, alcohol, and many more. And then I forgot to mention, and you don't have to go back, but CISD University, we had the Hidden in Plain Sight room set up, and then had Tony Hoffman also available to come and speak along with the DA and the parent as well. For substance use intervention, because every situation is so different, our interventions are based on at-risk behaviors identified at school, and we really work on collaborating with the parent or guardian of that student to make sure we're getting them the appropriate support, or at least connecting them to resources in our community. And so once again, the counselors provide resources as needed, and then we also have and work with surrounding entities such as Tri-County, T-Chat, which is a telemental health delivery of mental health services, yes, to youth to help to, through parental consent, they can help support our students. And consequences with substance use, once again, the deterrent program that is in progress for students who are caught vaping. If a student possesses, sells, use, or is under the influence of marijuana or another controlled substance under state law, it is a mandatory DAEP placement. And then a misdemeanor criminal offense determined is either by the county attorney for juveniles or the district attorney for adults 17 years and older. And if the offense is a felony of controlled substance violation, then it is a mandatory expulsion or JJAEP placement per Texas law. And the difference between those is the amount of the substance found on the student at the time.
All right. Any questions?
So there's back on the consequences slide. Back on the consequences slide, are those if an administrator or a teacher realizes the student possesses, sells, is under the influence, whatever those categories are, is that automatic or is there discretion? What's the level of discretion for consequences?
And that can be something we can invite. We have Steve Mirror, who also helps with our data collection and the disciplinary aspect of the data. He would be more than happy to come in and explain a little bit more about the disciplinary inside of it.
I'm Chris. He gets on. I'm Chris Povich, and Assistant Superintendent for High Schools. I can talk a little bit about the discipline on that in general. A lot of times, if the vape device does not have a level of THC that bumps it up into the felony category, then it's considered like cigarettes, on-campus tobacco. Oftentimes, that ends up being about a 3-day in-school suspension for the student. What has happened is with the vape device, the amount of THC is in it bumps it up off into the felony part. And so then we end up with an expulsion hearing, and we have been putting students on probationary expulsion is what we've been doing. so they haven't been sent to JJAP. They serve a 15 days of DAP assignment back on campus, and then they're on probation for the rest of that time period that they could have gone to JJP. And then at the principal's discretion, if there is any other, a second offense of any sort, then the principal can revoke the probation, and then the student will have to serve the JJAP time. That's what we have been doing. We're in the process of trying to figure out something else. Depending on the county you're in and the district, other school districts, what the consequences have been on those. And so we're trying to be more equitable with what we're doing with our students versus others. So the county has been working with us on that. So it's possibly changing. So, and that's what we're working on. But I give you an honest answer, that's what we've been doing this past school year. Okay.
So in your experience, are the students, the issues that, you know, the vaping, for example, that's caught, is that unique students, or is that repeat offender students that keep kind of coming back and doing the same?
You have very few repeat offenders, because if it's a repeat, then it's a mandatory DAP or JJAP. And when you go back and look at the JJAP numbers, we don't have that many in JJAP for vaping. My experience is most kids that go to DAP or JJAP, that's a one-time deal for most kids. And then they, you know, we would hope that they would stop the behavior, but at the very least, they learn not to bring it to school, at the very least.
What's the difference between the two acronyms you just gave?
All right.
JJ and the DAP?
Yes, I'm sorry. DAP, we have short-term DAP right now, which is a kid is 15 days, they're removed from their campus, and they come up to here in Conroe, and they're in a school. I think of it as in-school suspension off campus. All right? And so that's a 15-day offense. That's the most they will serve. After the 15 days of serving that time here at a school, not Conroe High School, another school, it's housed over at Washington, then those students will go back to their home campus. If you are accepted in JJAP, you're expelled from the district, from your school. You're actually enrolled in another school, JJAP, that's run by the county for the school districts in Montgomery County. Those can, usually it's about 9 weeks, 18 weeks, semester, school year, could be a calendar year on those placements before a student returns. So JJAP tends to be a lot more severe and significant on the amount of time for a student.
So I know Dr. Hines had spoke about some of this maybe a couple board meetings ago. And so the JJAP, my understanding is he had said that there are enrollment issues in terms of capacity. Correct?
That's for everyone, yes.
Across the county.
Across the county, they take not just Conroe ISD students, but all students from Montgomery County, yes.
Is that the case also for the in-school suspension that's off campus, the DAP?
Well, it's not in-school suspension, it's DAP. That has been, but we've always made accommodations for that. And so one of the things what we did this school year is we hired a long-term sub so that we can increase the number of supervision there, increase the number of students. We've already hired an additional teacher for next school year. So we've been working on that. We are currently working on a long-term DAP placement. So it's something between 15 days of DAP and JJAP. Now there's a possibility, and we're in the early stages of that, but we're looking at a 30, 45, 60-day DAP placement that would give us something in between the 15 days and the longer. So we're working through those details right now.
You say how many kids are in these programs, and if there's kind of like a change you've seen in the past few years?
The change would be in the short-term DAP. What we're seeing right now is the vaping is really the behavior that's getting them there. Right now, the vaping seems to be one of the number one issue that gets students there. You know, in my experience over the years, it was alcohol was one that seemed to be. Now you don't see as much of alcohol on campuses, and then it end up being some of the harder drugs at one time, and then I've seen the prescription drug abuse. That seemed to be an issue, and now it seems like vaping and the THC has been the major issue that I've seen for the DAP assignments. We've tried to move away from placing kids in DAP as much for shorter time periods, because when you do short-term DAP, you can have 5, 10, or 15 days. Usually if it's a 5-day assignment for a kid, you try to do that in ISS on the campus. It's closer instruction, and we're trying to get kids back into the school for the instruction purposes and that. I don't see any other trends besides that, to be honest with you. Are there more kids going to the DAP? Well, yeah, but when you look at percentage-wise, there's a lot more kids in the district, so you would expect that. So really, I would think it's more of an influence of going from when I first joined this district, there were 27,000 kids, and now there's over 71,000. So that's the difference I've seen on it. I'm not sure any other trends besides that. I've always asked how many kids are repeating, going back to DAP. It's very few, and that seems to have been always the case. So, any other questions I can answer or try to answer? Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Povich. Next subcommittee update is from membership. Ms. Kersey will be presenting.
Okay, so we've had a few things going on with regards to membership. So you'll recall from last meeting, we approved the electronic application that was posted on our website May 1st and distributed across the ISD channels to advertise. That'll be open for folks to apply through June 30th. Later this month, our current SHAC members will receive an email from Bryce or Wade asking for your intent to come back and serve on SHAC next year. Once we get that information along with attendance records, we'll be able to, as the membership subcommittee, we'll be able to come up with how many spots we need to fill and then start our membership selection process at the end of starting in July. So the other thing that's been going on in our last subcommittee meeting, there was interest in having a rubric, and so I'll just pass out there's more than you can get, if you don't mind. Thank you. And so the subcommittee, our membership subcommittee, has put together a rubric, and the purpose really here, the goal is to have a tool so that when we're going over and looking at the various applications for next year's SHAC committee, we can look at it using the same lens and being able to write down and jot down some notes about the various candidates that we review. And so the idea is that this would be something that each of us on the subcommittee would fill out for each applicant, so that when we come together as the subcommittee, we can review our notes effectively and efficiently on the various different candidates. So it's really just meant to be a tool for each of us to use individually. You will notice this handout that we just passed out looks a little different than the Excel file that was included in the notes for this meeting. It's been amended slightly based on feedback that we received so far. So I'll just run over it quickly for you guys, but really everything on here is directly from the application. And so the point is, whatever the candidate provides in their application, that of course is what they're going to be assessed on, so that we're assessing folks in an apples to apples fashion. So you'll see applicant name, assessment category, and these are just the various different things directly from the application. So, you know, what's your experience with youth in the community? What's your occupation? What kind of skills or experience may be helpful to our SHAC committee? Interest in participating in SHAC subcommittees. The reality is most of the work happens outside of the 4 meetings a year, and so we want folks to come in and being on SHAC that are interested in participating and being active. Interest in leadership roles, completeness, professionalism, and is there anything else that we want to note about the candidate? So the idea here is that, like I said, each applicant, we would fill this out for individually as the subcommittee members, writing down our comments and notes, and then when we come together to meet as a subcommittee, we review our ideas and our discussion, and then that helps facilitate our selection process. One other thing to note at the bottom, we added a reminders and references section. This is just linking back to the guidance from Texas DSHS, where it provides different traits and character traits and things that we should be aspiring in our SHAC membership. Any questions?
these all saved in some location?
They're not currently, so once it's saved, I presume we can,
Do you mean, to clarify, do you mean,
Once they're filled out?
no, they're not.
They're not
Are they gonna be
stored.
saved or just for somebody to swap?
So the idea is that, for example, I'm on the membership subcommittee, so for each applicant, I would write down my own notes on here, and then during the subcommittee meeting, come together with everyone and discuss. But they're not meant to be shared or saved or distributed. So I won't see anyone else's notes. It's just my own personal tool to use. Yeah, good question. Anything else? I'm gonna make a motion to approve. You want me to approve it? Or just use it? Okay. To approve it?
Does anyone feel strongly like we need a motion for members to use this principle for assessment? Is it individual, optional, just wanted to share a way for people to guide their thoughts when they're reviewing applications? Because everyone comes from different backgrounds and different levels of training when it comes to reviewing applicants.
I don't feel strong. Okay, okay.
All right. Great. So next up, we have the mental health subcommittee updates. All right. So before I get started on this next bank of slides, I just want to have kudos to the subcommittee for mental health. We roughly estimated the amount of hours that our volunteers have spent working on these cell phone guidelines. We think we've spent at least 100 and greater hours on generating these cell phone guidelines for our students. And so we're very proud of all of the effort that has gone in and the time for people to volunteer for the students of Conroe. So in a very timely fashion, it just so happened that the U.S. Surgeon General issued a new advisory in late May. For those of you who are not familiar, the Surgeon General advisory is a public statement that calls the American people's attention to an urgent public health issue and provides recommendations for how it should be addressed. Advisories are reserved for significant public health challenges and require the nation's immediate awareness and action. These are his words, not mine. And in May 2023, the SGSU issued an advisory on the risks of social media on youth mental health, including depression, anxiety, and lack of human connection. And so this came out while the mental health subcommittee was working concurrently from our last meeting to come up with a set of recommendations the SHAC could stand behind in regards to protecting the mental health of our students. So when you look at the facts, the critical brain development of our youth occurs there is a period of critical brain development between the ages of 10 and 19. Well-being experiences great fluctuations during this time. Adolescent social media is predictive of subsequent decrease in life satisfaction for certain developmental stages, namely 11 to 13 in girls, 14 to 15 in boys. And more than 3 hours a day on social media faces double the risk of experiencing poor mental health outcomes, including symptoms of depression and anxiety. As of 2021, when you poll 8th and 10th graders, all of them will tell you, or majority of them will tell you, they spend at least 3.5 hours a day on their phone. So there's a systematic review of over 42 studies looking at the effects of social media use, and they found a consistent relationship between social media use and poor sleep quality, reduced sleep duration, sleep difficulties, and depression. So when we start looking at the data with the use of screen times, electronics in our kids, it starts very quickly. You'll see the marks are 1 hour, 2 hour, and 3 hours, okay? And so when you get over that 3 hour mark, you really see an exponential increase in the risk of anxiety and depression in our kids. And so the heart of the subcommittee for mental health is trying to figure out reasonable expectations for cell phone use in school, knowing that the primary purpose of the students to be in school is to learn. And then the second, the primary purpose of the SHAC is to protect the mental health of our students. So I'm going to share some more information with everyone to help bring up to speed people who aren't quite as aware about this topic as the mental health subcommittee, because we've spent so many hours studying this. So this is from Dr. Murthy, the SG. He says, we all must engage in a proactive, multifaceted approach He's asking for immediate action, and he acknowledges that this burden cannot simply fall to parents and children. So that means parents need reinforcement in school, okay? He recommends creating tech-free zones and encouraging children to foster in-person relationships. And the bottom line is we don't have enough evidence to conclude that social media is sufficiently safe for our kids. In fact, there's increasing evidence that social media use during adolescence is associated with harm to mental health and well-being. It's an ongoing youth mental health crisis, and it's no longer impossible to ignore these impacts on our kids. Here is a study by this group from a Spanish children's group. It was published in Public Health. Public Health. It is showing the association with screen time, outdoor time, and vision. And it's not hard to know that the more time a student or a child is on a screen, the less time they are outside. And because they're focusing up close for prolonged amounts of time when their eyes are developing, their risk for myopia is increased. So if you focus up close for a long amount of time, the risk that you're going to not be able to accommodate and see far away is increased. So the short of it is the more screens, the less outdoors. That's the less active, less healthy movement, and also now worse in vision. This study was pretty amazing. You know, we talk about no texting and driving. They actually showed no texting and walking. This is a gait study that shows that when you walk and you try to text at the same time, it literally impairs your executive cognitive function. So it should be very easy for us to say, students, you should not be on your phones during class, intertime changes of the hallways, because you literally cannot text and walk in a straight line at the same time. You just can't. So this is a study that shows about the impact on executive function and compromising safety in schools that are already pretty crowded. I think this one is a pretty easy one to swallow. This one is pretty weighty. This is a meta-analysis by this group with Dr. Chung and her colleagues, and it looks at the components of cyberbullying. What's very interesting is, as a nation, we don't have a solid definition of what cyberbullying is, okay? This meta-analysis used this definition to define cyberbullying, which is these 4 qualities happening would constitute cyberbullying: intentional aggressive behavior, repeated conduct, and unequal power between the perpetrator and the victim, and electronic technology isn't the medium. So any electronic technology can be used in this definition for cyberbullying. And put simply, a willful and repeated harm inflicted through the use of computers, cell phones, and other electronic devices. And what this meta-analysis did, looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of students, is showing that cyberbullying victimization is positively related to depression. So the more you're bullied, the greater your risk for depression. It has greater effect on females than males. Women are more sensitive to this than males are, based off this particular meta-analysis, but in no way does this negate the effect of cyberbullying on males. And then victimization from cyberbullying and your risk of depression increases with your age. So children have a lower risk of depression than teenagers, but the causality is there. We know that cyberbullying causes depression. And the reported side effects of cyberbullying on depression have increased over time. This is a really big deal because when you look at the data for cyberbullying in our students, it's not decreasing. In fact, the more we dig, the more we find, and we haven't plateaued either. So it's really scary because we know that cyberbullying negatively affects our kids. We know it increases their depression, it increases their anxiety, and we have not yet plateaued. So as a SHAC, we really have to think about putting things in place and having recommendations to the board that will positively affect the mental health of our students. And and the more we look, the more we find. I can't emphasize it enough, and I did the deep dive in the literature to look at all the things, and so this is just, I'm passionate about it because I've seen it. I've seen the data, and it's not reassuring. It's not good at all. So moving forward, what the mental health subcommittee has come up with is a general framework that's based on these 2 principles. And then what you'll see following this are recommendations that we would like to stand behind as a SHAC to protect the mental health of our students. The general framework comes from the Texas Legislative Guidance over the SHAC, which is TEC 28.004, to subsection C-2. And we are responsible for recommending policies, procedures, and strategies to prevent mental health concerns. And given the abundance of data linking student cell phone use with higher risks of mental illness issues such as anxiety, depression, loneliness, and suicide, the CISD SHAC recommends the following strategies to protect the mental health of our students by avoiding cell phone use during school hours, while concurrently providing a safe, collaborative school culture that promotes independent thinking, creativity, face-to-face connections, student success, and professionalism. So this is where we're starting. This is the framework for the following recommendations. Cell phone access during emergencies. It should be noted that with all of our recommendations, we all agree students will continue to have access to their cell phones during emergencies. There's no intent to decrease the access to the device during an emergency. Student security and access to phones during campus emergencies should remain unchanged.
Right?
Yes, sir.
Every classroom in CISD has a phone with it. The kids all will have to use that phone to call home.
Correct.
They don't use their cell phone.
I appreciate your comments. I respectfully disagree. In an active shooter situation, which is something our students really have to think about, and we train our kids to be safe in an active shooter environment. A student getting up to go to a wall may cross the pathway of someone peering into a classroom, and that could cause inadvertent harm to our kids. However, if a student has their phone on their backpack, which is there with them, they could very easily and discreetly, more importantly, call appropriate authorities if they haven't been notified.
All right, point taken. Again, normal thing, use the phone monitors. I've heard many times in the classroom, I use all my parents. If you use that phone.
We don't dispute that point.
Stay tuned. I think we're
Yeah,
gonna get to
we're getting there. We're getting there. We're putting these two out up front, okay? All right. Any student on a 504 or IEP should maintain use consistent with the approved intention of their 504 or IEP plan, so this should not disrupt this. Oh, so sorry. There we go. So that's a 504 for kids that are on a 504 and need their electronic, whatever medium it is, that should remain uninterrupted. We do not want to interfere with those. For time and space, students in K through 8, cell phones may be used respectively and responsibly before school and after school dismissal. They should not be used for videoing, recording, or photographing. During school hours, cell phones and electronic devices should be avoided and kept away from the day. Cell phones should be set on silent mode, kept in backpacks, and should not be visible during school hours, including classroom time, lunch, hallways, and locker rooms. For 9th through 12th, again, the same language. We see cell phones may be used respectively and respectfully and responsibly before school and after school dismissal. Given the evidence that students learn best from an in-person instructor and the criticality of human connection, the use of cell phones should be avoided during the school day. Students may have access to their phones during designated periods, not lunch, on the order of approximately 20 minutes a day. For example, students may have 2 10-minute cell phone periods each school day to manage more pressing personal matters. Outside of the designated period, cell phones should be set on silent mode, kept in backpacks, and should not be visible during school hours, including classroom time, lunch, hallways, and locker rooms. Cell phones should not be used for recording, videoing, or photographing. Extracurricular communications. To avoid sending mixed messages about the use of cell phones at school, all CISD communication with students regarding extracurriculars should occur outside of school hours and should include various methods of communication such as school monitors, announcement, Canvas, etc. for inclusion purposes. And for 9th through 12th, on the rare occasion where extracurricular communication must occur during school hours, students will be able to check for messages during designated cell phone periods throughout the day. For campus awareness, given the negative impacts on the mental health of students due to cell phone use, CISD campuses should be aware of mixed messages sent to students when requiring students to use their cell phones to access information. As such, cell phones should not be the primary mode for access to forms, extracurricular communications, QR codes, etc. And campuses should utilize Chromebooks, monitors, announcements, etc. in lieu of cell phones to communicate with students during the school day. Accountability. Students should be supported with appropriate interventions if necessary based on mental health concerns. Students should be held accountable with appropriate interventions that deter their desire to be non-compliant with campus cell phone policies. And cell phones or other electronic accessories should not be used to incentivize behavior or to fill classroom time in the event free time occurs in the classroom. So that's a lot. I'd like to open the floor for discussion and comments on what people are thinking.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
You talked about screen time as you did earlier. Is there a difference between computer screen time and cell phone and tablet screen time as far as the negative impact on young adults or kids, how many hours they work on this? My perception was computer was a little bit better, but that's just my perception. I don't know if that's true.
Well, from a vision standpoint, distance is distance. So it doesn't matter what you're looking at. If it's at a fixed distance, that's not going to change the negative impact on vision. And the more someone's on a screen, the less active they're going to be.
How about the addictive person that trades with that though? Like, is a computer less addictive than cell phone? Or
Right.
did that come up at all in any of the histories?
It all depends on the task and what the device is being used for. The problem with the cell phone is that it's the device and then what the other things that are on the device. It's the let me just check real quick my Facebook page or my Insta page or my chat or or my Snap or all the things, and our students are very smart and they're very quick, and it doesn't take a lot to pop it out, take a look, and that's the addictive behavior. That's the dopamine dump that's happening with the kids. That's the high where they see the device, they get the information, they have the dopamine, release, and then there's no connection, right? And so that's the problem.
Well, I mean, what I like about Conroe ISD is they have Chromebooks, not tablets.
Mm-hmm.
But they still use Chromebooks a lot. So pretty much how they do it. And that might be a separate, I mean, this is a cell phone topic.
Right,
so
this
that
is-
Chromebook thing, that's a whole other.
Sure.
When we were talking about me, I was the one that is for Conroe, because it's a cell phone, because it's less likely of them videoing in the cafeteria, in the hallway, right before she started with the subcommittee, I was going to school sometimes, whatever extra stuff they had. Came up to my journalist, and it said, we're writing, the writing strategy class, we're writing the journal class. I'm writing and it's time I take my phone and there's a text message and I go to the one text message to my Instagram and the teacher says, dot. And I was like, what happened to the dot. And this was the first time, that format in the back I could use it as a dot. So that, I think Chromebook would be less addictive or the less media.
I think they're less accessible.
So how many people are on the cell phone and mental health committee?
Lindsay, can you help me out with recalling it all? 6 people.
So was this was this a debated thing, like we can have cell phones for 10-minute periods? Is this a thought, or how did you come up with it?
Well,
That's my question as well. What's a designated period?
We always spend it for.
Well, we want to stand with the district. So I think we have to start in knowing that we could not find any campus policy anywhere in CISD that actually encourages students to use their cell phones. In fact, most of the language, very complimentary to our district, is that cell phones should not be used in classrooms. Okay, and so that's already the expectation of the students, right? The problem is happening that every campus, it's not necessarily a problem. The concern is that other campuses do things differently. And so providing some examples of what a designated period of time was intended to show the flexibility with how a campus could allocate that 20 minutes. Because our role is not to tell any campus how they need to run. Our role is to come up with recommendations that we think are in the best interest of protecting our students' mental health. We recognize that these things may not be congruent with current practice, and so we're trying to find reasonable ways to help this be implemented. And so that was just an example on what that might look like.
And that was disputed because some of the kids, some of us who have older kids, do use cell phones for organization purposes. They put their deadline, their kind of deadline, they do all the coordinating extracurricular activities with their study group. So if you give them 5 minutes end of the day or end of the class, they can quickly do that, and it's just very limited to do what you need to do and get out and not have enough time for social media.
So I have a couple comments. I think 6 of us that are here today are on the mental health subcommittee. I think we had closer to 9 that contributed over the weeks of putting this together. And those of us who were on the last phone call, which I think were all of us here that are present today, did agree with the recommendation. So that represents, I mean, we were unanimously agreeing on what the recommendations were. It was, as Samara said, lots of back and forth and lots of discussion and lots of different ideas. I think the idea with the designated cell phone periods is that we're trying to convey the importance is the time, right? It's important that it's not hours, right? And so we came up with 20 minutes as that felt reasonable, that a student can get done what's pressing and not drift off into things that are not necessarily needed during an academic school day. So 20 minutes, you can, if you're a working student in high school, for example, and you need to manage something about your job later, that can get done in a 20-minute or even 10-minute period, right? What we don't want is the students to wander off and get into things that aren't productive and aren't creative, right? And just waste the time. That's not necessary during the school day. And it contributes, every minute that they're doing that contributes to the 3 hours that Bryce said. That's kind of that threshold where, things really get pretty risky in terms of their mental health.
Plus they're having it at lunch, they're having it at whatever recess, or, or I don't know how the older ages work in terms of time, but, say about walking in the hallway, there, you're there literally just like checking whatever in between classes. I don't know even how much time they have to get to class, but it's like, that just adds the time, and it's definitely having a negative impact on their mental health and well-being.
So is this what is going to be proposed, or they're going to develop, recommend this to the board? Is this the policy that Jack talked for? Is this still a working process?
No, this is the final output from the mental health subcommittee, where we at, and to your first question, was everybody on the same page? I think if you sat through the meetings, because like I said, there are over 100 volunteers, and that's a conservative estimate of time that has been spent working through all of these things. I am really excited to see and proud of how our group started, because everyone came from a different lens. I felt like we were very well represented in ages all across the district, all across the classrooms, all walks of life. And so we actually weren't all on the same page when we first started, and we had very respectful, calm conversations. We started meeting weekly. We would task orient, come back, everyone kind of had homework, we would bring it forward, work through it as a group. All right, let's break again. And so it really was a significant effort where we all took time to understand where everyone was coming and massage this so we can make sure that the end goal of a recommendation to protect the mental health was what we accomplished. These are not policies. These are SHAC advisory statements as an advisory council that we would share with the board to know we've looked at everything we think is necessary. We've massaged this as a group. We've worked through it together, and we think these are the best things that our district could do to help protect the mental health of students.
It's easy for me to sit back here and ask questions.
No, please.
That was a part of the work, but so I'm not poking holes into it. But did you talk about, K through 6 may not need cell phones at all? Or did you, because this is a K through 4, right? Did that come up at all, or would you consider maybe K through 4, they don't need any?
Yeah.
There's no
We did specify K through 8 versus 9 through 12. So there is,
Okay, I missed that.
so just in general, that's saying K through 8, to your point, they don't need cell phones. They wait for the day. They can have them, right? So they can use them before and after school, but they should be in their backpack during school hours. Versus 9 through 12, we had suggested the designated on the order of 20 minutes throughout the school day for them to handle their matters. Another thing we talked about too for 9 through 12 was The idea that helped them understand how to use their phones productively, in a healthy way. And, you know, cell phones are here to stay. They're not going away. And so we didn't want to pretend that that's not something they're going to have access to, but to use it in a way that's productive and beneficial for them. So that was another thing we talked about, is kind of helping them set those boundaries and help them understand how to use it in a positive way.
Subcommittee talked about Apple Watches, or did that come up at all, or, and it's less of a concern.
AirPods did.
What's that?
AirPods came up.
AirPods.
Because in the free time, they listen to music. I hope that it's music. And if there's not a task going on, but so that came up, that would be the future right events that the cell phone would have to come out to say it.
So I think on the committee, the high school was the trickiest part, because those kids really need the guidance right now. And I have my third daughter going through college part. So on the high school side, I can see how difficult going, to this policy will be. And the 20 minutes can be decided by the school, obviously what works best for them. Some schools have a longer second period, a longer fourth period, and so whatever works into their schedule, if they, however they decide to use it, last 5 minutes of lunch, last few minutes of each period. But I think teaching the kids to use their phone responsibly, that they do need a little bit of time to check, to add things to their calendar, to check their calendar, if they have a job, to check their, work schedule, things like that. So I think that they do need some allotted time, but it needs to be, in a way that it's just being used responsibly and, for a task that needs to be looked at, because they will start flipping through all the stuff and checking their snaps and quickly snapping people back. They will. So giving it, in the hands of the high school where they can give the allotted times, and just saying that we think 20 minutes is enough.
Yeah, I think it was like a good middle ground. Like, we all maybe had different perspectives, and I don't think a policy that's extreme works. Telling a parent that, their child can't have a cell phone at all, or in the school, I think that's going to create upheaval. But I think you can have a middle ground policy where you're like, okay, this is reasonable. And I think through our work, we all found middle ground to make it like reasonable, and I think that's why with that you will likely have success, because the point of it is to like help the mental health of the students. I mean, it's a real issue. So.
Yes, absolutely. And anybody in the room, this is a topic that affects every single person in this room. So please, comments, thoughts, this is really a serious issue when it comes to the mental health of our students. That 3-hour threshold is not long at all. When you start seeing dramatic increases, that's a 30% increase for anxiety, depression, and then those students, 1 in 3, are likely to attempt suicide. So these are not benign or things of consequences or things on seriously.
I'm glad that this is being done. Actually, I'm ready to vote yes.
Thank you for the subcommittee on all this. So, and just a plug for Tessa Stephanie. I was one of her things at the school that was probably life-changing. Now I have a plan for my kids, but it was very helpful to do that.
Maybe the thing I'll add, oh, go ahead, Liz.
How or who is going to because if you take a picture that has to live on top of everything, I think it's very hard for her to do.
Yeah, we had that conversation too. So we know that donuts aren't good for breakfast, okay? But we still recommend a balanced breakfast, and parents still give their kids on it. I'm one of them, okay? I have no shame. I am also a working mom. I get it. Sometimes we take the shortcut because we just have to. But it doesn't change that we still recommend a healthy breakfast. And so that's really where the rubber meets the road with these recommendations, that we understand that this may not be the easiest thing, and it will cause a little bit of change, or a lot of bit of change, depending on what's been going on, but we know that campuses have policies for substance stay away, so this isn't inconsistent with what the schools are already saying and asking them. And protecting the mental health of our students isn't dependent on whether or not something's going to be implemented. The recommendations still should remain, and we are wanting to partner in however way we can. So, not to transition off the topic, but just to share something that one of our committee members made are these guidelines to success. So there's several different ones, but this was one I thought was really very clever. Cell phone free CISD classrooms create face-to-face. Environment where face-to-face relationships, creativity, problem solving, and independent thinking flourishes. Awareness of others, attentive listeners, and active participants. Connection and engaged learners. And so we as a SHAC and as a mental health subcommittee are happy to work with the district and come up with these clever ways to just put the reminders out. But it's, to your point, it may be a culture change for students and it may be a culture change for campuses, but we're here to support however we can. And so we have to start, and be firm with what is in the best interest of protecting mental health.
And we would love to work with the staff and the students and just to get a fair ground of what is reason, what is realistic.
Maybe we could discuss the study before the last time we got together. I don't know if there's any kind of quantification of how much extra time it's going to take to do that.
In terms of enforcing.
Yeah.
So as Bryce said, our policies are very consistent with what we already have up here, right? So this is no different than what CISD has already said they think is what we should be doing in our schools. So as far as enforcement, I'm not going to be the best person to answer that. I mean, maybe someone from the district may want to say what's going on today, but I think a couple of things on that point. It's important to have a consistent message from administration, right? That starts from the board and it goes to administration and then it goes out to the campus foundations teams. So we're saying as a SHAC, this is what we feel like is in the best interest of our students in terms of mental health. Assuming we're all on board with this will get presented to the board, and then it's up to the board to then go to the district and say, yeah, we think this is a good idea, and then that kind of trickles down. But I think it's important that everybody's aligned, because to Laura's point, one teacher trying to go off and enforce this is not going to be effective or successful. So it's going to take a cohesive change on our campuses to say, yes, it's time. Something, we're contributing to a decline in mental health, and we need to, as a school, do better.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I just, you just brought that up before in a different meeting. Like, there's some other studies that other schools have implemented this. I just wonder if there's any kind of quantification of how much extra time or other things that they did.
I didn't run across that
totally
specific
agree with
question.
what
I didn't run across that specific. There's lots of studies, but as far as how to implement or the time required to implement, I'm not sure.
I did talk to one of my family members, and their school has no phone in this. So I asked, well, how do you communicate with the high school? And she said they have one person designated in front office to get all the parents involved. And then they put, but it's a private school, it's a smaller school. That goes to their locker, or that goes, so maybe enforcement part, not the messages part, but enforcement part might be, we need to add some staff members with KPI.
It is, and each teacher's gonna have their policy in each room. And they have to be coming down from the principal, but that they're the ones actually there. So if somebody's doing it, who cares? That's what's gonna happen in that room. But all you can do is recommend, right?
Right, this recommendation to the board would be to put like their handbooks, right? Would be like every school within, it would be in their school handbooks that parents sign. We don't know which is them, but they signed it, so if they have an issue, we signed it. And then, this is a great little thing right here. Could we not have that in the classroom?
Absolutely.
Yes, there are a lot.
I mean, that's like, it's very, it's easy to read, it's catchy looking, and it doesn't say doesn't put a negative connotation for using your cell phone. If it's a positive on, let's put
Really wasn't into all that, okay?
And I may have missed something. I'm Lisa Garrison. I'm the director of elementary schools. I just wanted to know if you've had the opportunity to talk to our, like your committee, to a cross-section of our principals to get feedback on this before you go to the board, so we can look at the actual implementation piece and see kind of what they think the struggles would be.
Yeah, I had not, I reached out to one principal to schedule, but our schedules weren't compatible so far, but that's still cooking. And we did talk about going to different principals and talk in regarding the implementation piece. I think the part that we just keep ending back up in is that the mental health recommendations are not dependent on whether it's difficult to implement. Like the standard for what is expected to protect the mental health is the standard of what it is. And the data is shocking. And so to that, so the short answer is no. But, and while we are interested in helping overcome the implementation struggles would not change the recommendations what's in the best interest of, of mental health.
Agreed. Totally. I don't think that needs to be the conversation. You know, y'all know what you want your recommendation to be. As someone who, for my job, does this, where I roll out the way we do things, the way we implement things and get buy-in from our principals, I just think that would be valuable to y'all.
Yeah. No.
And as the district, if I can say this, I think that's something that we could easily facilitate for you instead of you running around trying to figure out who you want to talk to. If you want a cross-section of principals to talk to, am I correct in saying that I think that we could facilitate that for them? But I think it's important not to have an opinion on whether what y'all want to, I understand your goal, but I think there's there's a couple of things in here that I'm wondering, will that actually ever work? And I just think hearing, whether you agree or disagree with what they say, just hearing what they think their struggles would be in that implementation. Because my thing is, if they take it to the board, I think those board members are going to say, I think that, they're going to be asking themselves, can we actually do this? Will that actually work at a high school? So just as a piece of anything y'all do when you need our input like that, I think we could facilitate that for you.
I think we intentionally.
I am not a high school person, okay? I do little people, and I think your little people policy sounds about right, okay? And Chris, maybe you could help me with this, but one of the things that kind of concerned me, I wondered about taking a child's, or not having access to your phone during lunch. I understand why, okay? But I'm also going safety component. We've got large groups of kids together. If something happens, I want my baby to be able to get in touch with me, type of thing. I just kind of wondered, in questioning that, would that work? Also, like the locker rooms, I just want to ask a high school principal. There are a couple of things when we read through here, I wanted to go, what would a high school principal, I want to ask somebody what they think about that. Not that I agreed or disagreed necessarily. I just want to know what they think.
Yeah. Well, and we intentionally stayed out of the implementation piece because we didn't want to tell any campuses what to do.
But is 20 minutes
provide the
even?
best.
And that's how it feels. It feels intentionally made.
Yeah.
It was by design. Yeah, that was by
that's how-
design.
yeah.
And the 20 minutes, right, it says approximately. So if 25 minutes works better for your campus, or 15 minutes, right? Like there's some flexibility built in. The point was to convey it's not 2 hours. It's 20 minutes,
Sure.
right? So they're trying to
'cause
give
you're
some
trying to do the
understanding of like,
decrease.
let's do as small as we can, recognizing every campus has different scheduling. Different periods may work better for your campus than another. So we intentionally tried to stay out of that.
You did a good job of that. I can see that. Just
it
that's
was-
my
if it-
input.
yeah.
Just if y'all would like to talk to a group instead of you having to facilitate that, I feel like we can help you as a district.
And we've had folks on the committee, as well, we had 3 different folks that I can think of that were on our mental health subcommittee and would answer questions as we had questions. So I feel like we definitely do, he just lines things up for us, Wade lines things up. So I do think we have access, but like I said, we were trying to stay out of the implementation and let that be y'all's piece. That said, we had also said as a committee, we wanted to make sure that if y'all want our input on how to brainstorm, how to come up with, mnemonics and different things, we're happy to walk alongside you as, we figure out how this.
I can just tell you, if I want buy-in and I want my 38 principals to actually really get behind something and really do something, I ask them about it before we roll it out and say, I would ask them before I did something, because their buy-in piece from them, I found is extremely important in making things go smoothly.
And I agree with that from a rollout perspective, but as far as the data doesn't change,
Right.
right? And so
Sure.
that's really what we're talking about is we have this information, we're now informed and educated, what are we gonna do about it? And so that's where we're at.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Is the mic on? It's hard to hear in the room. So one of the things that I just wanted to just kind of share, what I really appreciate, just kind of summarizing what I've heard and working alongside with some of the leadership that's here on our SHAC committee, is, what we understood in the process, they're like, well, what can we help with? And I do think that we've called them guidelines to success. I've heard them called recommendations. And I think that's one of the things that I really want to put my hats off to them as going from first saying we're going to create a policy and then also consequences. We're like, well, hold on a second. We've got 68 different campuses. Is it 68? How many are about to open? 69? Yeah. It depends, right? That do have different communities, different aspects, different things that our principals go through a process to be able to have input of their community. So they've taken all these ideas, all this data, and they've come up with which they're calling recommendations that would go to that campus team to have that conversation in foundations, right? That's part of what sets up those expectations in the school district. If you've heard of the, Grand Oaks Growl, the Conroe High Pride, you've heard of the Woodlands Strong. There are these acronyms that are called guidelines to success that are the things that they put in place that the kids get behind, because kids got to get behind it too. We've been talking about parents, we've been talking about teachers, but there's nothing more powerful than students holding each other accountable, especially at high school. So I really do appreciate that. Also, Ms. Becky Fralix, did I say that correct? She mentioned we can't go from 0 to 100 overnight. There's flexibility, right? It depends if you're a block schedule. It depends if you're 7-period schedule, what that looks like throughout the day. But what I see this as is like, hey, campus, these are things that we found out our data and things that are affecting our kids and their mental health. How can we look at things and just think, how can we change some things that we do every day that causes our kids to pick up their phone and be on it every day? Simple things like, hey, you've got practices changed to the track, not the gym, and a message being sent out at 1:30. Like just things during Algebra 1. I mean, I'm just, those simple things that I really respect from the team that they've brought together, and we all know it's a process, right? I hear it's not an overnight thing, and I hear it's not an overnight expectation. I appreciate that from the group. I also appreciate what this is called is that guideline to success for that overall, right? I can envision each school doing something like this and creating that, something, and it being something that has like some kind of, I don't know, Highlander on it, but they take this and those kids created their own. And I just wanted just to share that we do have a good policy in place. That's what they've checked. What they're saying is, hey, there's some things that we want to make sure that we're also looking at, which I wanted just to clarify with the group, because we keep calling it policy versus, and I think it's not a policy. It's just a recommendation. So thank you for all that work. It has been a lot of meetings that you guys have done and put together, and I appreciate you doing the homework to stay in line with the language that we're trying to use with our schools, right? Creating a new acronym or something would be hard to implement versus saying, hey, schools, in your foundations team, look at these recommendations that we are saying about cell phone use you need to address. So just thank you for that. That's all I wanted to say.
I'll just add that you're putting me in a bad spot because my son's friends are all day trading in high school. And so that is really going to affect the entrepreneurship that's going on. I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding about the day trading, but I'm kidding about my own bad.
Very good, very much, and very good. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
I'm Jeff Stickler. I'm the new assistant superintendent for middle schools. And I love your thoughts. The data absolutely doesn't lie. I have a lot of educators and counselors in my family. and all of them agree with what you're saying. I think schools are a mirror of the society that they are in, hopefully at an elevated level, right? But, how did we win the war on smoking cigarettes? It wasn't, and yes, you want to ban them in schools, but it's until the kids start understanding how bad it is for them and the parents start understanding how bad it is for them and how all of a sudden it becomes not the cool thing to do, then it goes away. So, and I love the community outreach that has already occurred, and I want to encourage to continue that, and maybe even into student handbooks before just saying no cell phones K through 8, because you're 30% more likely to X, Y, Z, and because you're 80% more likely to this, and because of this, there's no cell phone. Because then as a parent reads that, why are they telling me my kid can't have their cell phone in school and I should be able to get in touch with them every second of the day at any time, and now I can't? This is why, right? And these are the reasons why we are asking that. Plus, besides the mental health piece, is the ability to learn is severely decreased if that phone is within arm's length and turned on. Like, even if they're not using it, they're thinking about it, right? So I totally agree with that. I think you have some great statistics, and I don't want those to be lost on the community. So that's one thing. We got to continue to reach out to the community, to parents, to the kids. I love the face-to-face connectedness. The one I remember in high school in the 80s, the one piece I see a phone being, if you have the kid that no one sits beside in the cafeteria, and I can't use my phone, I'm going to have to sit there and watch the other kids talking to everybody. We would, in a perfect world, we would have kids go over and sit with them and talk to them and so forth. If you're using your phone, it's an easy excuse not to so, there's both ways on it, but you don't want that kid, no one's on their phone, but they're over there in the corner, and all I have to do is look at other people that are having fun and talking, and I'm not part of that, right? So we would have to, what I would suggest is during lunch is to also encourage the positive behaviors instead of just reducing the negative behavior, encourage what positive behaviors, like the face-to-face conversation and so forth, right? Like we should be encouraging in the schools, look for kids that aren't communicating with others and go sit with them as another student and reach out and start a conversation and so forth instead of no cell phones, right? So those are just some thoughts.
No, thank you so much. Your last comment, so the implementation piece, we intentionally stay away from. The ideas and the brainstorming of how the shack could come alongside the district, that really started happening at the last meeting, and we were like, let's just get the recommendations out and then let's partner. Because the role of the shack really, this year has been very active, which has been different than previous years, and so I think us stepping forward and volunteering to do this, and holding ourselves accountable to the TEC guidelines is a big thing, and so we did start brainstorming on what that would look like, and then we kind of pulled the reins, let's just get this, let's just share these, and then let's figure out how we partner and come alongside, because we're here to help. And your concern about the student that's isolating, that actually is what drove us on this accountability one, to add this accountability piece that students should be supported with appropriate interventions based on mental health concerns. Because what you've just stated is identifying that kid that is at risk for that elevated chance of suicide. And so when you start seeing kids that are having this repeated behavior of social isolation, not connectedness, that's a great way for the campuses to get buddy systems in place and peer-to-peer support. And so we did talk about that, and it was brought forward as a concern. And I guess the flip side of that is that, if as parents, educators, administrators, we know that there are students that are in that dark of a place, that, they should be top of the list for us to be, addressing, helping, for lack of a better phrase, just loving on and helping them get to a more positive mental place. So we hear you and we 1,000% agree, so thank you.
Thank you.
And we talked about the exact scenario that you described a lot. And
Yeah.
so we do have some, we don't have to dive into it today, but we did come up with some neat ideas that I think would be helpful on how to help those students with that transition.
And through it, I was talking to my high school daughter about, how she would visualize it, and that was her number one concern. The students at lunch that didn't have anyone to sit with, who they would talk to. And we discussed ways that, that could look different. And part of the time period, we've talked about all different things, but, a phone zone where maybe kids could step over to a phone zone, and then you can also identify the kids that don't have any friends. So we have thought of all these things, and it is a concern for us. And I think it is a way to identify the students that we are concerned with their mental health also. So hopefully that helps you. Anything else?
All right, so with all of those comments said, is there any recommendations for revising? Would we like to make a motion, call for a motion to approve these recommendations on the chat?
Is it possible to share this with some of the cross sections of principals that she said?
Yeah, it is, for sure, absolutely, we're happy to meet. I think that if there's language that needs to be changed, we can always come back and amend it.
Yeah.
I think it's pressing enough that we send those, at least we have some basic recommendations. And then when we meet with principals and that group comes together, it is pretty hard. I did reach out to our campus principal and we tried to align and it was really hard and everybody's very busy. But
it comes from the big guy.
yeah, no. So I think getting some recommendations in place, because that's the other part is moving this forward so that it is an expectation that as a summary and months of new plans, that we recognize this as a mental health concern for our students. So yes, I think we should meet with them. Yes, we're happy to revise it. We can always come back at the next check meeting and revise any statements that we would need to revise. If that's reasonable, if you don't think it's reasonable, I totally respect your opinion as well. So.
I think to Bryce's point, this is a crucial time to get something in front of the foundation teams and things because they are setting the expectations for the whole next school year. And so, what I would like to see is us support the recommendation as is and go to, the board with that. And then if we need to amend it and it looks different from implementation, that's okay because it is a transition, right? So we're going to grow and we're going to learn things and it's going to adapt, but I don't think it'll change the actual recommendation, which the key point is let's minimize cell phones to protect our students' mental health.
I love it.
So,
But it's just, when it comes to the principals, I hadn't thought of that until Ms. Pearson spoke to me. And I just got to thinking, right now this summer, I don't want to ask any more expensive principals. Well, also parents and families and those and just whatever. And so, but it might be something, like she said, if they're going to ask 38 elementary principals, we're going to change the sheet 38 buy-in because they're going to be the ones who's doing it. And then learning wise and stuff would be very helpful. I mean, when I taught for the district, we got our new scope of sequences when we came back at the end of July, August. So I kind of feel like maybe even somebody in the district can correct me. I don't know timing, I don't know schedules. But maybe there is time for at least one little opportunity to get a community together with police principals just to get their input. And maybe it's exhausting, it's great, it's work. And I'm not saying that. I'm just wondering, because I feel like they're right, but I don't know. I've been out of game for many schools.
I think like what Ms. Garrison said, and just think about how the legislature works. If they want a new education bill, they create a bill, but then TEA creates the policy, right? So this is a recommendation, and I think what makes Conroe ISD so strong is that we do rely on principals to decide what's best for their campus and their particular needs in that area instead of making blanket policies. But at the same time, you should know what the spirit of the district is.
So to Sam's point, I don't think it changes necessarily what we're doing today, but I'm definitely supportive of meeting. I think the mental health committee and whoever else wants to join in would definitely be supportive of trying to have a meeting with the principals or whoever the district thinks are the right, personnel to meet with.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you're Mr. or Dr. Stickler, but to his point, the education gap, the knowledge gap is really wide. I mean, we just have a lot of work to do on bringing parents up to speed. And I know how much I learned on this topic just by the last couple of months. And then in the community, I know Tessa has her sentiment on it very rightly so. But we have a work cut out for us as a community, as parents, as educators, to educate the students. I mean, it's a big undertaking, and I definitely, I think the buying piece is really, really good and really is the next step in the education piece.
Well, I think we could, my hope is that we vote yes, and then if there's changes to this, we can do it later, or the board might change it too, if they're gonna hopefully develop their own policy. In the appropriate time, as I would move.
All right, so we'll call for a motion to approve the SHAC cell phone policy, cell phone recommendations, supervisory recommendation.
I move that we do so.
Second. All in favor? All in favor? 11 in favor. Any nays? Okay, so, to our next, so we'll move pretty quickly on these last two. The alternative supplemental health curriculum, any updates, Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Okay, so there's two things to the Alternative Health Curriculum Subcommittee. One is the scope and sequence review, and two is looking at alternative curriculums. So I'll do the alternative curriculums first, and in May, the subcommittee met with Tanya, the founder of Esteem, to learn more about their health materials. The meeting was informative and helpful. Esteem is a Texas company that creates health curriculum that aligns with TEKS. They are currently used in 60-plus ISDs across Texas. And feedback on the Esteem workbooks during the meeting and the curriculum from parents and district personnel was favorable, especially the use of physical workbooks to make the topics more personal and engaging. It was noted that some workbook topics would be good opportunities for our counselors to come into the classroom to teach and engage with students. So we discussed the ways that CISD can utilize Esteem if we choose to, which is supplementing existing health curriculum, Health 1 curriculum with Esteem, or replacing existing curriculum with Esteem. Those are two things that were floated. No decision, no recommendation at this point to the overall SHAC is occurring. And the subcommittee will review the latest version of the Esteem workbooks once they are available in mid-June for comparison with our existing health curriculum. And then the second piece, so that's coming up, and then the second piece is the scope and sequence. Mr. Haymark put the first few weeks out, and the subcommittee is reviewing that. And as discussed at our last SHAC meeting, the district is working on that. And the scope and sequence is a detailed document provided to Health 1 teachers that specifies which sections, materials, questions, etc. will be covered for each week of the first of the 9 weeks. And the subcommittee, as I said, is currently reviewing that and providing feedback, and once ready, the remaining 9 weeks of the scope and sequence will be reviewed.
Any questions on that? Okay. Next, thank you, Mr. Costello. Dr. Haymark, physical activity and fitness.
Oh, just Mr. I'm not quite that. It's a dream. But don't tell my wife. But at the conclusion of the last meeting, some items that were pinpointed for further emphasis for next school year were an increased focus on nutrition within PE and health programs, an emphasis on proper nutrition and athletics programs, and then opportunities for community partner engagement and presentations. So with that in mind, those recommendations kind of guided me to begin formulating our professional development for next year for all of our health and PE teachers. So we're going to start off right in August and at our district-wide professional learning day. And we already have several community partners in place. They're going to present on proper nutrition to support PE programs, but also proper nutrition to support athletic strength training programs. Because some of the conversation we had is, a kid goes into the weight room and they're on a segment time, they're working out, they're working hard, but then they leave and they're going out to Whataburger, McDonald's, all these places, and you I was an offensive line coach. You want those guys big and strong, but what are you fueling your body with? Put in a lot of calories, but what kind of calories are you putting in your body? So there's going to be a focus on that, emphasis on that. And we're going to start with a little motivation with the teachers as well, like, kind of assess yourself in your life, in your home. What kind of things are you doing, to motivate yourself personally, but also your own personal diet, your kids' diet, bring it down to your personal beliefs and the things that you're doing now, and then let's get that out to the kids. We're also going to have some community-based activity programs that are going to promote lifelong interest in health and wellness that are activity-based. And so trying to get kids, to find these activities and games that they could continue for the rest of their life, break it down for them, teach them the fundamentals, and then let them progress at their own pace, but also increase the interest in these activities so that they want to play when they're out of school. You get 1 year PE credit out of high school, but let's, get those ideas and those foundations down to where they want to continue to play these games throughout the rest of their life. We have several activity-based programs in place on campuses. We talked about several of them: Marathon Kids, Fitness Finders, Girls on the Run, Boys on the Run. These are programs that students may possibly, over a course of a year, they run a full marathon, but it's broken down into segments, and they win all kinds of awards and things like this. But one of our subcommittee parents is active in a group called the 100 Mile Club. She couldn't be here tonight, but she's going to work with me this year to try to introduce that to some of our campuses as well. So it's just another option to get kids involved and just being more active. A couple of items proposed to be considered down the road were an increase in instruction on proper breathing and stretching techniques, and not only as a part of overall wellness, but also as a de-escalation tactic for students. Luckily, we do have several PE teachers in our district who are certified in these techniques, and they have offered PD throughout the years, and they're also a great resource. If one of our teachers wants to go visit their class, we're beginning to do what's called instructional rounds, where a teacher can leave their campus, we'll provide a sub, and they'll go watch this happen in a classroom, get those ideas, and then have that teacher go to their campus and instruct their kids so they can work together on implementing that. And then one more thing, another item is to continue to expand our knowledge of CPR. We talked a lot about CPR this year, and that's something that's very personal to me as well. Just over the years that I've been a teacher and a coach, some of the situations and things that have occurred, they're never too young, and you can never practice enough. And so there is a program that I'm looking into to hopefully implement more of that into our intermediate PE program, so those 5th and 6th graders, and it's actually having the CPR mannequins on campus so they can practice on those mannequins, the same ones that the high school kids use in the Health 1 class. So that's where we are. Anybody want to add anything to that? That was it. I know we're short on time.
I was excited about the CPR program. That's what I have to add. I was like, I have he's going to 5th grade, so I was like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. No, near and dear to us, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Hayward. I have no new business to bring to the table. Does anyone have anything they want us to table? Yes, ma'am.
I do.
Okay.
I don't know when we're doing the agenda how you do something like this other than come up to the mic. So this is the end. Is this on? This is the end of the SHAC year, and I have a gift for Dr. Spear for being our chair this year. It's a little bit of CISD swag, so just thank you for your leadership there and everything that you've done for us. Just a little tidbit of the impact of what this committee can do. Speaking of Tessa Stuckey, she's gone to several places in our district, but when we got the shack behind it and you helped us advertise, in a couple of days, we had almost 100 people at the next site. So I just want the power of what you can do to help bring awareness to our community is endless with this group. So thank you, and Dr. Spear, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. This has been really, I love it. I just love it, and I think that I think we're all better together, and I just cannot. Dr. Upshaw and I had brainstormed about what this committee could do or this council could do, and the sky is the limit. And so I hope with anything after this year, when we close out, we'll keep working until the next one. But I just hope people feel the energy about what can happen when we come together and stand behind the students of CISD. That's what we're here for. We are here to help improve their health and come along and support the district. And so if you remember nothing else about me, I just hope you remember that is where my heart is in this position. So anyway, all right. Well, those are, I guess, it. Thank you. It's really embarrassing too, because I'm not like your son. I'd rather just go on about my business. So on that note, I have nothing else. And yes, ma'am.
So what happened is, just with this included within the meeting, and we talked about awareness and working in the community. Is there any way, the reason of more kids, and if they are advocate of nutrition, health, and mental health, and they can implement more maybe student councils in the school, and invite student councils in the schools, and if they bring that back to their school, maybe we would have that awareness and more representation in our presentations and outreach programs.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to have student involvement, because getting students behind what the advisory recommendations are from the SHAC is really powerful. I think the motivation for students to be here needs to also be incentivized, where when students attend, they're recognized as ambassadors from their campus. I actually have brainstormed about this on ways that we can get kids into this meeting and then take out the information. So yes, and we always have to stay tuned. Okay. All right.
There are kids on the chat.
There are, but I think just to try to get more awareness is difficult. We've had typically they come from the academy because they're across the street. They can go. Like, a lot of times they may not be able to drive or whatever. But
Right.
But we did have pretty good participation this year. Several. One we had a student that did speak up. So it is great. So I think it's a great idea, and we'll continue to build on that as well.
We had one meeting where every single person at the table commented. We're very excited about that. Okay. Without any other comments,